Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey everyone, I am excited to have these guests on the show today. Dr. Eric Westman and Amy Berger wrote a new book that just came out and is to help end your carb confusion. And how many people are confused with carbs these days? I mean, it can get really overwhelming for people and they just say, forget it, I'm just going to eat what I want. But really, we should be striving to be metabolically flexible, reduce inflammation in our body, reduce stress, and the big word you'll hear a lot about lately, insulin resistance. So their book really will help you move from carb confusion to carb confidence. And just to give you a summary of the book, it's about feeling overwhelmed by the avalanche of information out there about diets and health. I think is pretty common for a lot of people. If you've been tired of spending so much time, tons of money, following complicated and expensive plans and protocols that don't deliver the results you want, how many people have done that? I think a lot of people are too strict on a ketogenic diet that doesn't work for them, but they struggle with having no fruit or bread in their life. And then some people will just want to have a simple food plan and not be so confused as we should, right? So the new book, End Your Carb Confusion, does that. Dr. Eric Westman has over 20 years of experience as an internal medicine doctor and obesity medicine specialist. He's helped a patient in his keto medicine clinic at the Duke University to lose over 26,000 pounds and has reversed conditions as type 2 diabetes, PCOS, high blood pressure, and lots more. In the book, End Your Carb Confusion, he shares his time-tested and science-backed strategy with you. If you spent years doing all the right things, but you're still dealing with the excess weight, diabetes, heartburn, joint pain, fatigue, skin problems, and other issues, End Your Carb Confusion book is the GPS you need to help navigate your way from being frustrated and disappointed to feeling empowered and successful. You'll be able to find the level of carbohydrate intake that is right for you now, and then learn how to switch gears to a higher or even lower carb diet when the time is right for you. Dr. Westman gives you the information you need to start reclaiming your health today. No complicated, specific, scientific gobbledygook information in there. It's just straightforward, exactly the information you need to understand how you got to where you are now. Hint, they say, it's not your fault. And more important, how to get you where you want to be. I feel the same way. My goal is to help clients who are trying to get their body, environment, self back by doing all the so-called right things, but they continue to struggle with unexplained weight gain and chronic fatigue and poor performance, poor recovery, and depression, anxiety, and skin issues, and all this stuff that they're talking about in this book. So it's a really great book for you to get. As they say, you shouldn't need a PhD or a private chef or $1 million to lose weight and get healthy. We want to lose fat weight. It's a simple, straightforward plan laid out to you in this book to fit into anyone's lifestyle and budget. Either if you shop at organic co-op or discount chain, this program will help you reach your goals, whether you prefer a gourmet meal or even fast food, they talk about in our podcast today. No matter where you're starting from, End Your Carb Confusion book can lead you to your destination, a renewed body, mind, and spirit. And we so need that this year And that's why I posted this podcast to come out in January, and their book just came out, and it's just good timing to get out of this 2020 and get into 2021 with some new positive outlooks, attitude, and energy. So today we'll talk about how and why they wrote this book, and why we have carb confusion in the first place, and we'll go into all sorts of stuff. I did meet Amy Berger and Dr. Eric Westman on the low carb cruise last year in 2019 with Jimmy Moore was hosting it. We were supposed to obviously go on the cruises past 2020 May, and we didn't make it because of COVID. But it's an excellent trip. I know Dr. Barry's taken over the low carb cruise from Jimmy Moore, and I think it's in May. But if you really want to get to know people as real people, like Dr. Eric Westman and Amy, and all sorts of people, like, of course, Ken Berry, Dr. Berry, you're on a cruise for a week with these people, and they're just, you're hanging out all day. You just get to be friends with everyone. And it's such a rewarding conference that we have when we're at sea. Then we have days we're out just enjoying ourselves wherever the stops are on the cruise ship. But if you want to learn something and get to know these top leaders in our industry, that's a great opportunity to connect with them in person when they are just like you and I, just normal people. And so I do say that because in the podcast, I talk to Eric, and I forget he's Dr. Westman because I met him as Eric. So I forget how amazing he is and how intelligent he is and what an impact he's made in our fat loss industry and health as a leading doctor in this area since working with Dr. Atkins. So all their information and bios, everything's in the show notes. Don't forget to go to the Low Carb Athlete YouTube channel. You'll be able to see our interview and see what everyone looks like. Sometimes it's nice to see us versus just hearing us on your headphones, but enjoy the show. Let me know your questions. And if you get the book, there's links in there. It's right on Amazon, and enjoy it. It's a easy to read book. I got a press copy and I really loved it. So I will get a copy myself as I like to highlight and pin down, tape down, tag dog deer, what's it called? Dog page, dog ear page, the top areas I want to go back to. So grab that book and read it, and they have online programs you can follow as well. Okay, enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, it's Debbie Potts, and I'm so excited and honored to have Eric Westman, Dr. Eric Westman on my show, and the Amy Berger famous people, both just amazing educators, authors, and just impacting our world on what healthy is and how to lose weight, burn fat, and actually, Eric is the one that taught us last year at the low carb cruise that it's fat loss, not weight loss. And I've corrected myself ever since that cruise last year. So I'm excited to have them on to talk about the new book, How to End Our Carb Confusion, because I know there's so much confusion out there on keto, low carb, what carbs are good, what are bad, what should we do? And here we are to clear up all of our confusion with a new book. Thank you, both of you on the show today.
Thank you.
So, Amy, why don't you start? Why you guys decided we needed a book to end our carb confusion? Is it obvious that everyone's confused?
It's obvious to us, I think, probably all three of us, right? I always sort of explain that when I was new to I've been eating low carb like over 15 years. And when I was new to this, it was easy to get started. It was simple. There was the Atkins book, and there was Protein Power, and there were like one or two good forums, like the old school message boards. You know, this was before Facebook even existed, Twitter, Reddit, Instagram. They didn't even exist when I started keto and when Dr. Westman started researching. So you had a food list, you followed the list, and it was great. And, you know, keto and low carb have become so popular the past few years, which is great. I mean, we're all thrilled about that. But because there's so many more people out there providing information, there's a lot of misinformation, or there's a lot of information that might be really helpful for a certain kind of person or a certain situation that isn't really the best advice for a different situation, but everyone wants to apply all that stuff to themselves. So, we wrote this book to kind of bring everybody back to center and focus on what works and why, and who and for whom, who needs to do it and why and how.
Yeah, Eric, Dr. Westman, what do you find? You wrote, I just was saying, I just have these books sitting here on my bookshelf. You wrote these amazing books with Jimmy Moore. What made you feel like you had to write another one on, with keto clarity? We just still needed something else to go into the why of carbs and the confusion.
Yeah, so the keto idea clearly works, and it will work really for everyone. It's just that after 20 years now, many people, including my brother, they're not going to do a keto diet. So I wanted to bring the knowledge that we've learned in studying low carb diets, and I've studied low glycemic diets, I've studied keto diets, I've studied low fat diets. They all can work, and I think the key to helping as many people as we can is to have people learn how to match their carb level to their own metabolism. And the reality is a lot of people don't need to do a keto diet, or they're afraid of it or off put. There are a lot of doctors who still are against it because they don't know about it. So what we're trying to do in this book is to, number one, take away the confusion of doing keto. So we have a very simple system that we've studied at Duke for 20 years, but then also include higher levels of carbs for those who don't need the keto level of carb restriction, as we call it in the medical literature, a carb restricted diet. So, it's really kind of bringing the knowledge that we've learned in the trenches to everyone, including those who can eat carbs and be healthy.
Yeah, well, it is confusing, as what the book is, to end your carb confusion. But I think it is so confusing, how to get started for people who hopefully with this year of 2020 would be motivated to get healthy and control their blood sugar, and looking at the information that the media doesn't tell us about healthy people and different viruses that might be out in our world, how insulin resistance is a big part of it, and obesity. And I think this book should be read by everybody, because that's the biggest thing I hear and read about every day, about getting healthy and protecting yourself. And
yes, and so having the knowledge that that blood sugar and insulin levels are really what you want to control, I wanted to write a book that was understandable, not a lot of jargon. And that's where, when I met Amy, who had written The Alzheimer's Antidote, and knew that she had a similar point of view, that she wanted to keep things simple, we do outline, and largely because Amy's a professional writer, in understandable terms about blood sugar going up, insulin going up, and insulin resistance. But we don't get too technical. And I think that's an important part of the book. We're not trying to preach to the scientists and the doctors. We're trying to bring this information to the general public.
Yeah, and I know, Amy, you've been busy this year. This is your second book that you've been working on, so it helps to be a little more isolated at home in our world this year, so you can really get that information out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge introvert. I spend a lot of time at home anyway, but I guess this year was a good time to write a book. But Dr. Westman's right. This is the book that we would want someone to give us if we were new to this, right? If I didn't know anything about this, give me a very simple guide to get started. This is the 101, this is the intro course, and it's enough. You don't need anything about this book, but if you want to go on to something more advanced, you can. But if you're new, this is a great guide. And we also think, for all the people that have already been eating some level of a lower carb or keto diet for a while, this can just help remind people how simple it can be when you let it be. You can weigh and measure your food and track and do all this great stuff if you want to. But if you also just want to go to the store and buy the right food and come home and eat, you can do that too. And it works, on any budget. If you want to go to the gourmet fancy co-op or the 5-star steakhouse, like that works. You can also, don't kick us out of the club. You can go to the fast food drive-through and get the burger patty, and it's still going to work. This, like Dr. Westman's clinic, he sees people of every race, every ethnicity, every budget level. This has to work for everybody. And so we wrote what we hope is a book that's understandable and that can work for everybody. And it's entirely customizable. The guidelines we give you work for everybody, but within those guidelines, you get to pick and choose the foods that you like, or, if you're kosher, if you are halal, if you are allergic to fish, if you don't eat pork, whatever it is, you get to totally customize it. And even the carbohydrate level, like Dr. Westman was saying, some people need to stay really, really low. Some people can be higher. And so we don't have a single scientific reference in this book. There's no bibliography. And I'm a little worried that we're going to take some heat for that, but it's because we didn't say anything really controversial. To say, hey, some people are really sick and could really benefit from a very, very strict keto diet, and some people don't need that. Like, there's zero controversial about that, right? I think.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like you said, it's N equals 1 really, and if you feel good, I mean, what scientific experiment do we need? Like, I feel great when I wake up and I have energy all day and I'm thriving. Do we need scientific evidence on that or research study to show that? I mean, I think you just have to live it and see how you feel, and then you adapt to the changes if you need to tweak things here and there, as I said, based on how you feel. And there's no scientific study really to go into that, I would think. But I love the thing, what you guys said in the book I wrote down is, are you already been eating less and moving more? Because that's kind of what led me down my path, is everyone, as a personal trainer for 25 years, like, exercise more. And I always find, like, all right, if you don't change what you're eating and then work on your digestion and absorption is important as well as changing what you eat and why you eat and when you eat. I mean, you can't out exercise a bad diet plan. I think so many people, especially athletes that listen to this show, kind of take that advantage, like, oh, I worked out this morning, I can eat whatever I want. But, it is being stuck in that, mindset that I exercise, I'm cutting down when I'm eating, I'm going to get results. So that doesn't mean you're healthy.
Or that if you burn it off and you're at a healthy weight, you kind of, I must be perfectly healthy. Well, you don't, at what price? What's that doing to you internally? All that sugar, all that carbohydrate, even if you're burning it off, there's still some stuff going on in there.
Yeah, and Dr. Westman, go ahead.
Well, a major theme of all of the studied and sound approaches that work today is to cut out the junk foods, the highly processed foods that are designed to make us eat and eat and eat and eat. And so, we don't have allowance for candy bars and, the junk foods that just about every solid dietary approach would tell you to do. So you want to be, what I've learned in the 20 years now in the medical world is that we don't teach doctors and or the general public how important nutrition really is. You wouldn't put gasoline with sand in your car. So while you can have the idea that you're burning off sugar and all that, it's the sugar metabolism, the raising the blood sugar, raising the insulin, getting stuck in that carb burning. You don't want a whole lot of that going on. And so the major theme of the book is taking away the fear or concern about eating fats and raising now the fear or concern, well, not really fear, but just you don't want to eat a whole lot of sugar. And then the advanced course for keto is that starches get digested to sugar. So a potato, sweet potato, pasta, rice is just like having sugar metabolically. So, but we do bring out the page 4 quote list that I've used in my clinic for 20 years, and we've studied it, and we've put it in there as the sort of, this will work for everyone, not that everyone has to do it. But so this book will be a corrective book for those who are trying to do keto and it's not working for them. In fact, we are just finishing our first online masterclass where we're teaching people and teaching the basics. It's just, so we'll have a video digital learning platform, and now the End Your Carb Confusion book platform. Most of the people coming into our class, they were eating too many oils, too much fat, too much cheese, too many nuts, and then they were hung up on the net carb idea, where they're getting way too many products that say great for keto diets when the total carbs is way high. So we also teach a total carb approach in the End Your Carb Confusion, because that's just more precise. It's more scientific than the kind of loosey net carb thing.
Well, I think a lot of people get that mentality that you can eat whatever you want as long as it's, the net carbs, and they don't look at, eating real food and looking at the total carbs. And I think you talked about that when we were on the low carb cruise. That was part of your seminar, I think, is looking at the total carbs. And I've always questioned that. It's like, net carbs, is that really cheating? Trying to work your way through that so you can eat that, or, it's keto approved. And now you get, what happened to paleo happening to keto. And now I'm sure there'll be carnivore approved foods coming out soon somehow. We'll figure it out.
Well, net carbs can work, and it's just that it's more like the over-the-counter version of a medicine. An ibuprofen 200 can work, but if you want prescription strength, opioid for pain, you see a doctor. So the total carbs and the 20 grams where we start people or bring people to is the prescription strength. It just works a little better, and it's not as confusing. You don't have to count so much.
Yeah. And then, Amy, what do you feel of the different sugars? I know we talked about that before. A lot of the foods out there have the different keto-approved sugars. Is that a part of something we should look at avoiding and not have too much xylitol and maltitol and all the substitute sugars?
Yeah, Amy, can you speak to that about, the total carb counting actually incorporates that? Right.
Yeah, the sugar alcohols are the reason we count the total carbs is because those things affect people differently. Not zero glycemic. Most of those do have some impact. Now, the impact is not as much as regular sugar, but it can impact blood sugar and insulin, and in some people more than others. And if that's impacting you significantly, and you're having a lot of that stuff every day, and then you wonder why keto, quote unquote, isn't working, it's better to get rid of all of them. Now, the thing that maybe there is one controversial thing that we do include in the book, which is we don't fearmonger about the artificial sweeteners, which those are a little different than the sugar alcohols. Like artificial sweeteners, meaning things like sucralose or saccharin or even aspartame. We know this is heresy, we know, but now ideally, in an ideal world, everybody would just drink water. Nobody would ever need anything sweet ever. But if you are living with morbid obesity or out of control type 2 diabetes or PCOS or something, you are much better off drinking a diet soda than drinking the regular soda or than drinking a glass of grape juice. And would water be even better? Maybe. But as a transition step, at least, to help you get that blood sugar down, get the insulin down, I'm never going to say that diet soda is killing you. Again, is it the best choice? Maybe not, but better than if you're really sick, let's move in the right direction. So that's where we think things like, and of course, the things like aspartame and sucralose do not really impact blood sugar and insulin. Some people claim they do. The studies really don't say that. There's some concern about the microbiome, that nobody really knows what a healthy biome is quite yet. That's in its infancy. So those things those little sweetening agents can be the difference between someone actually trying to do a low carb diet versus not. And I'd rather that they try to do it.
Yeah, so there's phases that we'll get into that you talk about in the book, how to get there. So the basics, I know you're really great in the book explaining, keeping it simple, because I think a lot of people hear these words and they're too embarrassed to ask, what does that mean? I don't get that. So could one of you briefly describe metabolic syndrome, and then we'll talk about carb sensitivity and insulin resistance, because we hear it all the time, but I think maybe people don't always know what it really means. So metabolic syndrome.
Metabolic syndrome is the new constellation, the new grouping of things that people have that actually lead to heart disease. And so we're getting away from the old total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol simple idea. So the metabolic syndrome includes blood tests and also some body measurements. So you have to have a doctor to help you figure out you have metabolic syndrome. So it includes the other two components of the lipid profile, the triglyceride level and the HDL level, not the total and the LDL. It also includes a elevated waist circumference and elevated blood pressure, even though the blood pressure might not be treated with medicine, and an elevated blood sugar, even though the blood sugar might not be called diabetes. So these are the findings that all put together can lead to the atherosclerosis or heart disease, stroke, things like that we are trying to prevent with lifestyle change. These still are the most common reasons people have chronic medical problems in the US, which is the diabetes, heart disease, stroke, things like that. So metabolic syndrome is the grouping of all of these findings together, which is partly blood, partly your body type. If you have extra weight, that means your abdominal circumference is going to be large. And if you have the high triglyceride, low HDL in the blood, then that's the metabolic syndrome.
And then Amy, can you touch on kind of what insulin resistance is and carb sensitivity or insensitivity for people?
Yeah, we make the point in the book that, when people hear about diabetes or even obesity, we think right away of blood sugar, of blood glucose, and hardly anyone thinks of insulin, because when people hear insulin, they think, oh, that's what people with diabetes take to lower their blood sugar. And that is one thing that insulin does, but insulin does like 500 other things unrelated to blood sugar. And the chronically high insulin is one of the big hallmarks of metabolic syndrome, or I would say metabolic syndrome is almost synonymous with insulin resistance, which just means your body requires a lot more insulin to do what insulin needs to do than someone who's more, like if you're very sensitive to it, you only need a little bit to get the full effect. If you're resistant to it, you need a lot more. And we make the really important point in the book that like all of the metabolic syndrome stuff Dr. Westman was talking about, and having obesity, having all this stuff can be a factor even if your blood sugar is normal. So high blood glucose is one of the criteria for metabolic syndrome, but you can be diagnosed with that even if your blood sugar is normal. And most doctors don't ever measure insulin. They're not looking for it. And so there's people living with, gout, hypertension, migraines, skin tags, acne, non-alcoholic fatty liver, hypoglycemia, all of these things that nobody's connecting to the insulin resistance or the high insulin because no one's ever measuring it. And in these people, the blood sugar might be perfectly normal. This is such a huge cornerstone as to why lower carb diets are so effective for so many people, even if you're not overweight, right? Even if you don't have weight to lose, but you have migraines or really bad PMS or so many other things.
Well, that's why I loved what I was reading about that in your book, is that it's not just because you're not overweight, 20, 30, 50 pounds, it doesn't mean you're healthy, that you don't have different issues, but people don't correlate those symptoms to having insulin resistance and having dysfunction in your body, having those imbalances, and we should really strive to figure out how to bring our body back to balance into homeostasis so we thrive and improve that aging process, rather than people just, again, athletes think, you know, I'm invincible because I can run 2 hours. I can go ride 3 hours fasted and I'm great. But I think a lot of times people don't see the whole picture of what we need to be doing to be healthy and to work on our performance and longevity. So I appreciate that in the book. Keeping it simple too, it's so essential.
Well, there's some classic high-profile people who were runners and developed type 2 diabetes. One of them is Professor Timothy Noakes, who is in Cape Town, South Africa, and he's popularized LCHF, and he's getting together an international group to write a textbook. I just got my chapters in for the how to do a LCHF keto diet. But his story and several other prominent keto people, they were highly athletic, running marathons, swimming across the Maui Channel twice, and then they had this gut and they had diabetes. So exercise is not going to be the key for everyone, and you want to be, I guess, have your eyes wide open to the fact that what you're eating might be contributing, even though everyone says what you're eating is healthy. You know, in fact, we talked about this, Amy and I, that just about everyone should try the keto level of carb restriction. And in our End Your Carb Confusion book, it's phase 1, because you may not know that that heartburn you've had for so long was from the carbs, or that joint pain that you had is actually from the carbs you're eating. And you wouldn't ever know unless you got all of the carbs out of the diet. So we do encourage people to try that. Not that everyone has to do it, but you might find out that it's not just getting older, that's causing these symptoms. It may be the sugar in the diet.
That's one of my biggest pet peeves, is blaming the aging process. It's always like, oh, I'm getting older. That's how it is. That's my new normal. And I was like, no, you don't have to settle and feel that way and feel like crap every day and just not look for solutions. And a lot of times it can be simple as changing what you're eating and changing those macronutrients, as you guys explain in the book. So Amy, why don't you let's dive into the different phases and how, like you just touched on the first phase, but what is Adapt for Life in the phases? Let's start getting into that part of the book.
Right. So it's the Adapt Your Life diet. You know, Dr. Westman is co-founder of this company called Adapt Your Life, and they produce, low carb and keto friendly products, but we're branching out into the education space, and this book is part of that. But phase 1 is basically a strict ketogenic diet. It's 20 grams of total carbs a day or fewer. And then phase 2 is 50 total grams or fewer. Phase 3 is 150 total grams or fewer. And to us, 150 grams of carbs sounds like a lot, but compared to what the average person is eating, it's still a low-ish carb diet. So even our most generous carb level is still lower than the quote unquote normal, like the average carb intake. And we actually have a chart in the book that you fill out, and based on your answers, it points you to the level that's right for you to start out at. And of course, the further you are away from where you want to be, whether it's with your weight or your health, the more severe your situation, the stricter you need to start out to get back to where you want to be. And then, like Dr. Westman was just saying, even if your current health and weight situation points you toward one of the higher carb levels, we kind of recommend that you start at keto, because you might have, so not everyone needs a ketogenic diet, but some people just feel their best when they are actually in the state of ketosis. They might have more energy. A lot of people report no more brain fog, really sharp thinking, joint pain is gone, like Dr. Westman said, the heartburn. All of these things happen that might happen at the higher level, but they might not. So we want everyone to start really low, see how good it feels, and then we walk you through systematically how to increase your carbs to find your own personal sweet spot. And you might say, well, I can have 100 grams of carbs a day. I feel fine. I don't gain weight, but I feel even better at 50. So maybe I'm going to live at 50 grams or 20 grams a day. And every now and then I'll have the pie at Thanksgiving, or I'll have the thing on the weekend. But, you know, most of the time you live in the lower zone.
And you're always explain that not to be obsessed with testing and having to be certain numbers. And I think that makes it more realistic and sustainable eating program for people. So you don't have to be, you know, testing your blood sugar every day and your ketones, but are you having people kind of go by how you feel instead of going, okay, I need to have 0.5 ketones, or I need to have 1, or I want 3, and people kind of get kind of crazy about that.
Yeah, Dr. Westman, do you want to field that one?
Well, you know, you can do those things, but you don't have to. So the method that we are showing people today is one actually that has been around for 150 years. Before there were any ketone monitors, before there were any apps, and in various forms, the Banting diet in London, England, the Dr. Atkins diet in the mid-1900s, the South Beach diet, these are all variations on the theme of low-carb diets. And if you learn the principles of how simple it can be, and you monitor the correct things, keeping the carbs low, having, you know, eating to fullness based on the meat, poultry, fish, and shellfish and eggs, limiting the veggies and the oils and the butter, not going overboard on those things, you really don't have to monitor a whole lot, because your body starts burning fat so well, your hunger adjusts down. Most of the time it's even gone, so that you're normalizing the intake of food the way we think it should be. You're not thinking about food all the time and craving. And, you know, do you want to spend all your time worrying about apps and journaling and all that? I mean, I remember a world expert in a meeting I was at saying, you must journal all of your if a program doesn't have journaling of your food, it won't work. And I had enough years of experience behind me to kind of go, well, I'm not going to use his program, because I don't ask people to journal at all. And so when you hear some people say you must do this, you must do that under certain circumstances, it's because the programs are different. And this one is particularly effective without all of that extra effort.
Yeah. And we could backtrack on Adapt for like the program. You've been running this program in your clinic. You know, you created it how many years ago to work with your obesity patients and health issues that people would come see you for, chronic conditions?
Yeah, you know, I'm going to be upfront that I didn't create this system. I adapted it, changed it a little bit, but I learned from Dr. Atkins, Dr. Eads, Dr. Rosedale, Dr. Bernstein, the doctors who were using this method. And then our work at Duke and Jeff Volek's work at UConn, now he's at Ohio State, we basically formalized what these clinical doctors were doing into the science. So our clinical trials were started about almost 20 years ago now, where we started looking at the safety of it. You know, I knew it could work. I got into this because 2 of my patients did this diet and lost all this weight, which was a rare event in my clinics. And I asked them what they did, and it was basically the Atkins diet. And, you know, once I learned about it, I was afraid of it and concerned, but I was curious. And then we started researching it. And now 20 years later, it's actually a good thing to do. It's healthy eating for just about anyone. But I know a lot of people still haven't been brought up to speed on that science that's been done.
Yeah. And Amy, I know a lot of times everyone's kind of going towards carnivore this past few years, and a lot of people have that fear of, you know, gluconeogenesis, if I eat too much protein, and what's the right amount so I'm not burning carbs and switch back to carb burner, fat burner. Can you touch on that a little bit? Because I know we've spoken about that a lot on the cruise last year together. We were chatting about that.
Yeah, I think in the you know, nutrition is so polarized. There's low fat and there's low carb, and nobody talks about protein, or at least nobody was talking about protein until recently. And I think in general, from what I've seen, most women don't eat anywhere near enough protein because we've been told it should be about the palm of your hand, size of a deck of cards. And that is total nonsense. If there's any woman listening right now, that's nonsense. There might be some rare cases where people on a very low carb have to be aware of their protein intake. And that could be like a child with epilepsy or someone that really has to micromanage everything. But if your main goal is weight loss or even athletic performance or just general overall health, I don't think anyone really needs to worry about quote unquote too much protein. You know, there is a biochemical mechanism by which amino acids from protein can be converted into glucose, but that doesn't happen just because you eat a gigantic steak. You know, it's based on the metabolic state of the body, and your body needs glucose. It does. Like, you don't have to eat potatoes and rice to get it, but your body needs glucose. So isn't it such a nice, good, handy thing that we can make it from amino acids, and we can make it from, we can even make it from fat. We can make it from part of the fat molecule, but you never hear anyone being afraid of that when they're putting butter in their coffee and adding oil to everything. So that was the really long way of saying that I think protein is critical. It is so critical for so many things. It's not just muscles, it's bone, it's hair, it's ligaments, it's enzymes, it's all kinds of stuff in the body that's made out of protein and amino acids. But I think one of the things that probably all three of us see in patients and clients is, because people in keto have been made afraid of eating a significant amount of protein, instead of eating more protein when they're hungry, they'll have a fat bomb, or they'll fill up on nuts or, you know, heavy cream or something. And then they wonder why they can't lose weight. But it's just because they're eating so much fat because they're afraid to eat protein instead. And, you know, in the program that Dr. Westman has used for 20 years, the protein foods like the beef, the pork, the chicken, the eggs, it's unlimited. Now, unlimited within reason. You can't eat 10 pounds of meat a day, but well, maybe if you're Sean Baker, you can, but it's you eat those foods until you're comfortably full. Yeah. You don't gorge on them, but they're not restricted.
So that's a good question, Dr. Westman, if you're going to add on to that. But what, like, feeling fullness and satiety, isn't that hard for a lot of people hormone-wise, leptin and ghrelin issues, that they don't know when to feel I'm full, and they are so used to overeating and not listening to those signals?
Yeah, I think that's a real issue. And over time, you will adapt and learn to understand those signals. The more you stay to real foods, you know, not processed, not keto bars and things like that. You want to limit those. But I think that's a function of just, we've grown up with fake foods so much. You know, the understanding about leptin and ghrelin is really in its infancy. You know, we kind of throw these terms out, and yeah, the keto diet does change the hormones in the direction that you would expect. You have more fullness and less hunger on a low carb keto diet. But I think that there is a process of learning to understand what true hunger feels like, not emotional eating, not stress eating, thinking thirst is hunger. That is something that a lot of people have to learn.
Mm-hmm. Amy, anything else on that? Just struggles people have often starting these programs?
Yeah, I think in the ideal situation, what we see is once somebody is off that crazy blood sugar roller coaster, right? No more wild highs and lows, the hunger kind of evens out, and they don't get ravenous anymore, and they're able to just eat, you know, a suitable amount of food and go about their day. But, you know, for the millions of people among us that eat for other reasons besides hunger, you know, we have to help those people too. And that is difficult. There's no magical answer except that it gets better on keto. For most people, it gets better. It might not go away. And then we just have to find ways to mitigate that as best as possible. So, like, if you have to eat when you're not hungry, can you at least eat pepperoni or broccoli? Like, can you at least not eat the carbs, at least stick to real good, whole low carb foods? But that's the cajillion dollar solution, that if somebody finds it, they can just retire to some tropical island on their own private yacht. But yeah, I mean, for most people, that's one of the nicest things that people experience. Forget the weight loss, forget some of that stuff. We have a mutual friend who, when she started this diet, she said, for the first time in my life, I'm not hungry. I mean, there's people that are hungry all day. So this, this definitely helps with that, but there are going to be some people that still eat, we eat when we're stressed, we eat when we're sad and lonely, and I wish I had an answer for that.
Well, Dr. Westman, do you want to, go into the Adapt for Life? Is their adaptation phase, as most people are coming off a high carb diet or eating plan, I hate the word diet, but just the way they're eating is more carb dependent. And do you find that there's a phase to be fat adapted and to become metabolically flexible in the program, or do you just kind of have it just go everyone 20 grams, start with there as your phase 1, and then adapt from there and just get through the phase?
There are a lot of ways to do it. I'm most used, in my clinic, I teach people to just start at the 20-gram level all at once, kind of like quitting smoking. It's better to just quit all of the cigarettes at once. It's better to quit all the sugar at once. You go through a withdrawal syndrome, meaning you may have some cravings. But, my former career as a researcher was helping people quit smoking, actually. And we helped develop nicotine replacement products and pills. And I have to say, it's a lot easier to get someone to quit sugar than it is to quit cigarettes. Even though it's not easy for some to give up the sugar. But we also bring up the idea of addiction to sugar and processed foods in the book. And that's real. This is a real clinical book that arises out of a clinical practice. And you may have to realize that these cravings really are part of an addiction. And they will pass. For most people, the cravings go away in a day or two. And then as you adapt to fat burning, you might have some fatigue, some headache. The way to minimize that is to add some salt in the form of bouillon or crystals or some electrolyte supplement. But be reassured that most people don't get the keto adaptation symptoms, or keto flu, as it's popularly called. Most people just sail right through.
Yep.
Then, of course, in my clinical practice, if someone has high blood pressure or heart failure, you don't want to add in extra salt. But if you're otherwise healthy, don't worry about the extra salt. Your body knows what to do with it.
Interesting. All right, another question, Amy. I know I'm jumping around my list here, but I want to make sure we talk about the confusion of carbs, of fructose, glucose, because I think, eating fruit, is it good or bad? Having fruit, and what does fructose on the liver and muscles, what goes into the muscle glycogen stores? That's a good one to dive into in the book, but can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so, when you have a really compromised health situation and we're trying to fundamentally alter your metabolism from burning mostly carbs to burning mostly fat and some ketones, it's really best to limit all carbohydrate, whether it's glucose, fructose, whether it's complex carbs, simple carbs, just cut it all. Like that's where end the confusion, right? Keep it simple, just limit all of it. But, there are different kinds of carbs. And some people are more sensitive to some than others, and it's so interesting though. They did a study out of Israel a couple of years ago where they would give, hundreds of different people the same food in the same amount. Some people's blood sugar would skyrocket, some people's barely budge. So we can't even say that these quote unquote complex carbs or higher fiber carbs are low glycemic for everybody. Your own body reacts very differently from somebody else's body, right? One person's high fiber bran cereal is another person's white bread with grape jelly. So you would think that glucose, meaning, well, I don't know, it's getting into the weeds, but for a long time, people with diabetes were encouraged to eat fruit because fructose doesn't affect the blood glucose as much as other starch does, like pasta, rice, other kinds of carbs that are 100% glucose or close to it. Fruit and fruit juice being about 50% fructose affect blood sugar less. So it was thought that this is safe for diabetics. Even when I was a kid, I think this brand still exists. There was a brand called 50/50 that was sweetened with like 50% fructose, 50% glucose. And it was marketed as being good for diabetics because it had more fructose. And so even though fructose doesn't affect the blood glucose or the blood sugar, by the way it's metabolized in the liver, it affects your insulin sensitivity. And so it's really not the greatest idea for people with diabetes or any other metabolic issue to be doing a lot of fruit. And it's not that fruit is poison. It's not that cantaloupe isn't causing diabetes. But when you already have a really severe metabolic situation, it's best to cut all of that stuff out. And then in the book, we walk you through if you get to a point where you want to start reintroducing that, how do you do it slowly and systematically so that you don't regain weight that you lost, you don't trigger health problems to come back. But that's really why we recommend counting total carbs and reducing total carbs, because then you don't have to mess around. Is it glucose? Is it fructose? Is there fiber? Is it resistant starch? It doesn't matter because you're reducing all of it,
Yeah. Keep it simple and end the carb confusion. Sustainability. So, Dr. Westman, do you encourage people get any baseline data, blood chemistry work, or just keep it simple, just get started, read the book, do the program, but do you want some baseline data or just some, here's my symptoms, here's my health concerns, complaints, and go from there? What should they do?
Yeah, if you're otherwise healthy, you're young, you've got no medical issues, not a whole lot of monitoring needs to be done. Or, one of the things we do in a medical practice is make sure that someone doesn't come in already sick, and they could be made sick by medicines they're taking, or so we worry about low potassium when someone's on a water diuretic water pill that makes you lose potassium, for example. But if, all a keto diet is doing is changing the food. So of course, I think monitoring the waistline, the clothes, how they clothes feel, the body weight, it's fine to measure. You don't want to obsess about it. We recommend not weighing more than once a week. And I know some people who weigh 10 times a day and get frustrated because it doesn't change.
Yeah.
So you want to be careful not to go too crazy with the monitoring. And you have to understand that it's not a linear process. Even as your body changes, it can kind of goes in a stair-step pattern where you might not lose weight or change inches all at the same time. But if there are metabolic issues like the metabolic syndrome, prediabetes, those things you do want to measure just to show how much better it's become. I did want to add in, though, the measurements are, it seems to me a little more complicated when we start bringing in the carnivore kind of diet. And the good news is that there's a study going on that's assembling the information of a lot of people who are doing a carnivore diet. And that'll give us, I think, an understanding of what the normal range is. So especially for things like cholesterol, the normal range for those who don't eat carbs is going to be different. I mean, I already see that happening, and it may be that the blood sugar levels are going to be just a little different on those who don't eat carbs compared to those who do eat carbs. And, there's no end of frustration of people coming to me that my blood sugar is 110. What's going on? I want it to be 90, and everything else is fine. And lo and behold, they're doing a carnivore diet. And, this is something we see, and I don't know that it's bad. I don't, and it's my hunch that it's actually going to turn out to be a good thing. When you're not a sugar burner, in your cells, it's okay to have the little bit of extra sugar in the blood. That's where the cells are that need it. But I know that's kind of a radical thing to say. But what we observe is the normal ranges of people who eat carbs, which is what the lab will tell you, sometimes doesn't fit with what we see in people who are otherwise healthy on a low carb or carnivore diet. So don't worry too much about those things.
Okay, good. And so people, the end of the year, starting 2021, they want to get healthy, hopefully, motivated to burn fat. Some people complain they gained a little extra weight this year, which I've heard a lot of, but how do people get started in the reading the book that who want to do the program with other people or have some coaching with it, some one-on-one? What are some options for people to get started? Amy?
Well, we have Adapt Your Life now you can do the diet with the book alone. If you just want to read the book and do your thing, you can do it, except like Dr. Westman, if you are taking medication for diabetes or blood pressure, then you want to have some kind of medical professional monitoring you, because those medicines might need to be changed almost immediately. And so you need to be really careful there. If you're not really on any medicine, you can just read the book and do it. But if you want support, if you want kind of encouragement and you want to be in a group that's doing it with you, this Adapt Your Life, now we have the masterclass and we're going to have some other courses. So what is it? adaptyourlifeacademy.com. You can get on the mailing list to find out when we're going to have other courses. But of course, there's so many support groups online too. There's so many, there's no shortage of communities, whether you're on Facebook or Reddit or wherever, but you have to find one that's trustworthy. I mean, that's the hard part, is finding a group where the information they're giving you and what's being said is accurate and scientifically sound. So.
Yeah, that's hard to do because people don't know any better. Like, oh, this person lost 100 pounds. This is where I need to go. And they don't really know what's good or bad. And they're confused, which is why they need to read the book and your Carb Confusion, because people don't know if it's sound or not, or if it's, based on just people's stories, or if it's based on science.
Yeah, and the thing is though, and we probably all see this, especially you, Debbie, with like the athletes you coach, they have such different metabolisms and they're so active and everything, but it's not really that anyone is out there saying anything that's completely wrong. It's just that they might, should a 70-year-old, postmenopausal female who's been yo-yo dieting her whole life and is 40 pounds overweight, should she follow the same dietary advice being given by a 25-year-old CrossFitting guy who's never had an excess molecule of fat on his body in his whole life? What works for him, even though they're both quote unquote keto, the approach that works for him might not work for her so well. And it's not that what he's saying is wrong. It just isn't appropriate for her situation. So that's where I feel like you kind of got to find somebody that is sort of like-bodied, rather like-minded, like-bodied, like someone that's in a similar situation to you. What did they do? And even then, you still have to personalize it to yourself.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's what, most people I coach end up people similar to me, that they gain weight. They don't know why. They're exercising, eating healthy, but they can't figure out what's wrong with them. And so I'm investigating a little bit deeper and figure out some clues to your hidden internal chronic sources of stress and external stressors. But I think so many people, just as we said earlier, just think, that's my normal. I'm getting older. This is my genetic destiny to feel like crap and be overweight. And that's what it is.
One thing I want to say, just like before I forget, because your audience, you've got like professional athletes listening to this thing. We were talking about the sweeteners and stuff before and how you can get the fast food. And that's true. This will absolutely work. But we talk about in that phase 3, that's the higher carb level, because that is going to be geared for people that are already leaner, more active. In those cases, that's where you start tweaking these other things. That's where the food quality might come in a little more, especially, these athletes, they have so many GI issues, because stress, a lot of like upper respiratory issues all year long. that's where you might, maybe Splenda's not the best idea in that. Maybe you really want to nail things down in that case. So it's all customizable, but like, because I know we're total heretics saying that stuff about the sweeteners and everything, but when you are a competitive athlete looking for every little edge, that's where you might want to refine all those little things.
Or when you feel like crap and your performance is going down and you just feel awful every day, then you might want to look at that. But Dr. Westman, what were you going to add in there?
Oh, I have sort of a kind of common sense. Someone's getting started with a program. If it's not working in 2 weeks, it's not the right program. It's a 2-week time period. I've seen so many people, they go to Weight Watch or WW or whatever program, and they just slogged for months and months, and it's not working. And people just tell them, "Oh, you're doing fine. You're looking better." It's like, no, they're not. So you want to, I want results, and you want your clients to have results. So, there's some exceptions to the rule, but if you're just trying something out there that you're not sure is tried and tested, and our program is tested in a clinical practice for 20 years, then, don't wait too long before you say, I'm going to try something else. This isn't right for me.
Yeah, and a lot of people are trying things, but they're not really doing the whole program to a T. They're just like part-time, then the next meal they kind of switch it up and fall off the wagon, and the next day they're on, then they're off, and like consistently 2 weeks, right?
I've learned to be clearer in saying that up front. If someone wants to do the keto diet, I say, this will work like a prescription pill. It's been studied that much, but you have to do it every day, 24/7, all the time. And, it's like someone comes back, "Doc, can I take the pill every other day? Or maybe half a pill a day?" No, you need to take it every day. You don't go back to the doctor and kind of try to change the pill, prescription, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm pretty clear. And yes, people say, "Oh, you're so strict." Well, it works. I mean, so people come to me, they want it to work the first time, every time. Here's how you do it.
Trust the process. And I think you have the experience and the credentials and lots of testimonials to prove that it works. So if you fall off the wagon, day 2, day 3, you go back to day 1. You keep going until you hit day 14, you're good. Keep going. Yeah. Well, good, you guys. Thanks so much for sharing your book and the why behind it. I think it's so essential to share, like, what's your purpose and your passion and your mission. And the book's out today as we record this, so very exciting, right?
It's release day.
And we'll put the video out on YouTube so everyone today can go buy the book on Amazon. And it's already #1, Dr. Westman said.
In the nutrition category.
Nutrition category. Yeah, overall book. Would be great. We'll put that out in the universe. #1.
Let's make that happen.
Yeah, so keep saying that out loud, then it becomes true, right? So anything else we need, we'll put in the show notes. You guys want to add anything else for 2021 goals and resolutions and positive vibes to put out there?
Just to say that, there's a reason the word keto isn't in the book title. It's End Your Carb Confusion. So if there's someone in your life that you think would really benefit from a keto diet, but they're not ever going to go quite that strict, they might be able to get halfway there just by, right? We all know people that all they had to do was stop drinking soda and they lost 10 pounds. So there's a middle ground for the people that just kind of want to get a little healthier. And I think this book can work for them too. It'll work for the hardcore people, but also the people that just kind of want to eat a little better.
Yeah. And I say that, I just told someone that yesterday, the word burpees, really you just tell people to squat, do a push-up, squat, stand up, and jump up. Don't say burpees. So same like keto, don't be scared. Say, and your carb confusion. So Dr. Westman, what's your mission with the book and what do you hope to happen in the year with it?
Well, I hope it's readable and it gets outside the keto echo chamber. Like Amy was saying, I think anyone who's curious about carbs will learn from it, and we're not preachy. We hope we set the standard now for just talking about food, rather than saying it's good, bad. It's you
Labeling.
have to do this, have to do that. We're getting beyond the fear of cholesterol and all that. That was a mess older people still worry about, but we don't bring that into this book. Turn the page on all that, and turn the page on 2020. I just want to be here.
I know. By the way, I was ordering, didn't get the Christmas cards in time, so I'm ordering New Year's cards, and they're so funny. I was looking at Shutterfly, and it's all the different ones. It's a lot more entertaining to do welcome to 2021 cards and happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Like, get the trash out, get on with this year, let's get out of here and move on.
Yeah. Amen.
So,
I would imagine 2021 cards are probably way better than 2020 cards were before we knew what was going to happen this year.
True. So thanks so much, you guys. I hope everyone looks in the show notes for all the links and go to Amazon and buy the book and find out more about the program. So definitely look into it, and good holiday gift idea. You can still get it for your family and friends, or New Year's gifts, because everyone needs to read this book. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us to continue to grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.